The movie begins with Peter Parker introducing himself as Spider-Man. He mentions how he got his powers from getting bitten by a radioactive spider, and he's been the city's hero for over 10 years. He has saved the city countless times. And after all the hardships and beatings he takes, he always gets up and loves being Spider-Man. Miles Morales sits in his room and sketches while listening to music. His parents scream his name and ask him if he's ready for school. He gets up and packs his belongings as his parents yell at him for being late. Jefferson, Miles' dad, asks Miles if he needs a ride to school, and Miles decides to walk. On his way, he trips and falls as he tries to paste a sticker on a sign, and his dad, a police officer, picks him up. Jefferson takes Miles to school and uses his megaphone to force Miles to say he loves him. Miles does what he asks and feels embarrassed as he walks into the school. He gets to class and is unable to keep up with the activities. He arrives late for class and makes a joke that only a girl named Gwen finds funny. He sits beside her and they chat for a while until the teacher stops them. After the class, the teacher shows Miles his test score and asks him to stop trying to quit school by failing his tests. While sitting in his room, Miles decides to sneak out of school and goes to his Uncle Aaron's place. Miles talks to Aaron and he sees a sketch in Miles' book. He takes Miles to a place underground, and they graffiti Miles' drawing on a wall. They listen to music while working, and a strange spider lands on the floor. It crawls onto Miles as he paints, and he unknowingly hits it off. As Miles and Aaron talk, Aaron gets a notification and informs Miles he has to leave. The spider crawls onto Miles' hand as he takes a picture of the work, and it bites him. Miles kills the spider and walks away. The following day, Miles notices that his trousers are smaller and his thoughts are louder. He walks into the school and meets Gwen. They talk for a while, and Miles' hand gets stuck on her hair. He tries to rip his hand off, but they go to the school's infirmary, and Gwen's hair is cut. Miles walks down the hallway, and a security guard confronts him. He informs Miles that he's aware he left the school the previous night, and Miles runs away. He runs into the man's office, and his hands begin to stick to everything he touches. Miles falls out of the window and walks on a wall as some birds stick to him and attack him. He gets to his room window and crawls inside. He sees a Spider-Man comic and realizes he has the same abilities as Spider-Man. Miles returns underground to where the spider bit him, and he finds the radioactive spider. He hears a strange noise and follows the sound. He arrives at a room, and his spider senses help him dodge a giant rock. He sees Spider-Man in a fight with the Green Goblin, and as he tries escaping, he gets stuck on a crane that carries him closer to the fight. Spider-Man sees Miles and saves him from falling. Spider-Man realizes that Miles has the same abilities as him, and offers to be his mentor. A giant collider activates, and Spider-Man informs Miles he has to destroy it or it'll destroy the space-time continuum. As Spider-Man tries to put the failsafe device, Prowler gets to him and the Green Goblin holds him down. Wilson Fisk, otherwise known as Kingpin, orders for the test on the collider to begin. As the machine is activated, Spider-Man gets free but is apprehended by the Green Goblin. He accidentally enters the machine and he sees multiple versions of himself. The machine explodes and sends a shock to the entire city. Miles finds Spider-Man buried under some debris and rushes over to him. He gives Miles the override key and informs him he must destroy the machine or it will destroy the world. Miles promises to help and he runs away. Fisk and his goons arrive at Spider-Man and he informs Fisk he knows what he's trying to do. Fisk gets angry and kills Spider-Man. Miles accidentally makes a noise and Prowler goes after him. He eventually escapes and returns to his house, where his parents allow him to spend the night. Later that night, news about Spider-Man's death is announced on the news. Miles practices being Spider-Man and he jumps off a roof. He falls to the ground and the override key gets damaged. Later, he walks to Spider-Man's grave and is approached by a man. The man taps Miles' shoulder and Miles accidentally electrocutes him. Miles realizes the man is Peter B. Parker, a Spider-Man from a different dimension brought there by the collider. Some officers see Miles, and as they approach him, he carries Peter and runs away. He then uses Peter's web shooter and gets attached to a train that carries him away. Miles takes Peter to Aaron's house and ties Peter to a punching bag. Peter escapes and tries to leave the house, but Miles informs him that he needs help destroying the collider. Peter refuses, but Miles convinces him to help while they walk on a wall. They get on a bus and make their way to Alchemex's labs, where Peter plans on getting the override code for the collider. Peter decides to go into the building alone and asks Miles to remain in the woods. As Miles awaits, he sees Fisk arrive and rushes into the building. He meets Peter in an air vent, and they watch as Dr. Octavius talks to Fisk. They enter the office after she leaves, and Peter realizes Miles can turn invisible. Octavius enters the office and sees Peter. She traps him on a seat and examines his cells. Octavius informs Peter that if he stays in the dimension for too long, he'll die of cellular decay. A fight ensues between Peter and Octavius, and Miles runs out of the building with the computer. They escape the building, and some workers pursue them with laser guns. Peter gives Miles one of his web shooters and teaches him how to swing. Peter begins twitching, and Octavius retrieves the computer. Gwen, who is Spider-Woman, arrives. She defeats Octavius and retrieves the computer. They get on a bus and go to where they can fix the override USB drive. Meanwhile, Fisk remembers how his wife and son died in a car crash as he was fighting Spider-Man, and he blames Spider-Man for their death. Octavius meets him and informs him that the appearance of multiple Spider-Men means bringing his wife and son from another dimension if possible. Mills and the others go to Aunt May's house, and she knows that Peter is from another dimension. Miles apologizes for Spider-Man's death, and she takes them to Spider-Man's advanced cave. They arrive at the cave and see multiple costumes. May informs them that Spider-Man from other dimensions arrived earlier. They are introduced to Spider-Man Noir, Penny Parker, and Peter Porker. Penny's from a future dimension, and she fights alongside her best friend who is a spider. They realize that someone will have to remain in that dimension as they return to theirs, and Miles decides to be the one. Gwen and the others test him and realize he doesn't have the experience needed for the mission. Miles gets upset as they talk about him, and he leaves the cave. Miles goes to Aaron's house, and as Miles writes a letter, he sees Prowler. As he hides, Prowler goes through the house and turns invisible. When he almost catches him, Miles realizes that Prowler is Aaron and runs out of the house. Prowler detects him with his thermal vision and pursues Miles. Miles gets into an accident that causes Prowler's bike to crash, and he narrowly escapes. Later, Miles arrives at May's house and informs the others that Aaron is Prowler. Octavius and Fisk's goons arrive at the house, and they try to take the override key which Penny fixed. Miles retrieves the key as the fight ensues between them and the goons. Miles tries to run away, but Prowler gets to him and tries to kill him. Miles removes his mask and reveals himself to Prowler, who spares his life. Fisk watches as it happens, and he shoots Prowler. It is revealed that Prowler is Miles's uncle Aaron. Miles runs away with Aaron, and Aaron apologizes for being a bad example to him. Aaron dies, and Miles runs away as Jefferson arrives. Jefferson sees Aaron and cries as he sends his units after the Spider-Man. Miles returns to his dorm and wrecks the room as he's angry. Peter and the others arrive and inform Miles that they all lost someone close to them. Peter tells Miles that they're going to the collider, and Peter has decided to sacrifice himself because Miles isn't ready. Peter then tests Miles, but Miles fails, and he takes the override key. He webs Miles to his chair, and he and the others leave the room. Later, Jefferson arrives and talks to Miles from outside his room. He apologizes for always being hard on Miles, and informs him that he wants him to make the best decisions with his life. As he leaves, Miles gets motivated and controls his powers willingly. He leaves the room and returns to Aunt May's place, where she has been waiting for him. She gives him a new web shooter, and Miles renovates one of Spider-Man's suits and makes it his new suit. Miles leaves the house and sits on a roof. He remembers Peter's words and takes a leap of faith. He falls from the building and begins swinging around the city. Meanwhile, Peter and the others arrive at Fisk's penthouse and see that he's hosting a party in memory of Spider-Man. They blend in with the waiters, who are wearing Spider-Man costumes, and make their way to the basement where the collider is about to be activated. Fisk arrives at his basement and orders for the collider to be turned on. The scientists turned on the collider, and it shakes the entire city. Peter and the others get to the collider and get attacked by Fisk's goons. Peter tries placing the override key, but Octavia stops him. She tries to strangle him, but Miles arrives and hits her away. Peter and the others realize that Miles can control his power at will, and he helps them fight. The collider begins to bring other dimensions in, and Penny Robot gets destroyed by Scorpion. Miles saves Gwen from falling into the collider, and they proceed to hit Octavius away. Octavius rushes to attack them, but she gets hit by a bus. They take out all the goons, and Miles inserts the override key into the collider. He reverses its effects, and as he sends the others back, Fisk attacks them. Peter decides to stay behind and help Miles, but Miles refuses and sends him back to his dimension. Jefferson enters the collider control room and watches as a fight ensues between Fisk and Miles. Fisk's wife and son from other dimensions see him as he fights Miles, and they all run away. Enraged, Fisk overpowers Miles and knocks him down. He informs Miles that the real Spider-Man couldn't beat him up and blames him for taking away his family. He knocks Miles to the ground, and Miles, motivated by his father, struggles to get up. And as he places his shoulder on Fisk, he electrocutes him. Miles then attaches his web to Fisk and throws him toward the override key. He uses Fisk's body to push the button, and as the collider turns off, it explodes. Jefferson arrests Fisk's goons and gets a call from Miles. Jefferson apologizes for Aaron's death and offers for them to paint some graffiti together. Miles puts on his mask, walks to Jefferson, and hugs him. Jefferson decides to work with Miles, and as Miles walks away, he asks Jefferson to look behind him. Jefferson turns around and sees Fisk hanging on some webs. Miles reintroduces himself and talks about how he has been Spider-Man for only 2 days. He talks about how he never thought he could achieve what he did and says that anyone can be Spider-Man. He introduces himself to his roommate and reveals his identity. As Miles sleeps on his bed that night, a portal opens and Gwen calls him. In another dimension, an alternate Spider-Man named Miguel receives a device that allows him to travel to alternate dimensions. He travels to the 1967 dimension, where he gets into an argument with the Spider-Man of that dimension. The end. Thank you for watching. Please check out these other videos and make sure to subscribe and tap the bell to be notified about our latest videos. We'll see you next time.